The fruit of the Spirit. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 names the fruit of the Spirit. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace." It says forbearance, I like patience. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. We are close to the end of this series, and we are on gentleness today. And I just want to tell you, I can't deal with this word gentleness without thinking about our culture a bit. Because, we've kind of gone crazy as a people. And this word gentleness brings to my mind how we have dealt with the phrase gentleman in our culture recently. Now, the definition of a gentleman, by the way, how many gentlemen do we have in the room? I saw one hand go up. Congratulations. The definition, I'm going to keep moving. The definition of a gentleman is someone who behaves in a polite or proper way. And that's where this thing of gentleman has gone sideways, because how we have defined what a polite and proper man is really wacky today. I think it has to do, we need to deal with this as we deal with this word gentleness, because we have some misunderstandings with it. Our culture has dealt with male masculinity and has moved into, naming the toxic male, and has tried to actually kind of move into cancel culture with men. What it's done is it's reacted against this patriarchal society, where men are in control. And it's a reaction against this impression that for a man to be strong and masculine, that is domineering. It's rude, it's oppressive, it makes women lesser. It's a push against the traditional expression of men. To the point where if a man stands up when a woman leaves the table, or holds the door open or picks up the bill, or it's even viewed, those actions are viewed as demeaning to women, because you're acting like I can't handle myself and I'm unequal with you. So gentle man has moved to a place where, in order for a man to be polite and proper, a gentle man has to be soft, has to be quiet, has to be submissive or passive. I want to tell you that there's a bad definition of gentleness being applied to manhood with that. There's a psychologist, my son's going to appreciate this quote, I think. There's a psychologist and author and educator named Jordan Peterson, who said it this way: "It is not okay to be a man. It is necessary. I want to tell you that that God's intention of manhood and womanhood is beautiful. And the full expression of being empowered by His way, what we're talking about in this series, being empowered by the presence of the Spirit of God and Him putting His nature and His character into us, will result in us being fully free as men and fully free as women, and not canceled and neutered in the way that God intended for us to be. See, I want to propose today that God intends for men and women to live free, to be alive and full, to be empowered to live as He designed us. For both men and women to be gentle men and gentle women. See, gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit. Gentleness comes from the very Spirit of Christ. It is His nature and His character that is infused into us. And it doesn't mean muting what He's designed. Gentleness in Galatians chapter 5. Just the word gentleness can be defined with the words meekness or humility, or to give consideration to someone else. Let me show you what Jesus has to say about it. In one of His first teachings in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus starts His teaching with what we call the Beatitudes. Blessed are you when. And He says this in verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Our word meek is the exact same Greek word that is translated for gentle. It's the same word. It means to be humble or gentle, to not be aggressive. Like really to wrap your mind around it, to be meek is to not be a threat to someone else. In this context, what he's describing here is someone who, in interaction with other people, is not in need of recognition. They're not functioning with other people, seeking the admiration of them for themselves. Rather, they're meek, they're gentle. They're not a threat to that other person. They're not seeing themselves or seeing others as competition. They're not moving in with someone as if they have to defeat that other person in order to gain something for themselves. They're not a threat. They're gentle. They're meek. It's someone who's not prideful. It's someone who doesn't have to prove that they're better. Now, it brings with it this understanding of you take the low position, or you just have received and inherited the low position. Especially with this phrase of they will inherit the earth, it's this assumption that they may not have much or may not be reaching for much. Simply not climbing over. And what Jesus has to say about people in this spot who don't need to win over someone else, he says their reward is enormous. You see, those who are after that kind of reward, their reward will be small and temporary. But the meek, the gentle, those who are not a threat to someone else, who take the lower position, they will have a reward far greater and lasts far longer than the momentary applause that the proud receive. They will have a reward that is far greater than the personal pride of property and accumulation so that people can look and see what I have and how good I am. They actually will have a reward that is far greater than the reward that Israel got when they inherited the land and they could be seen as something by all the rest of the nations. Their reward, the meek's reward, is to inherit the earth. It is Jesus winking to the new heavens and the new earth that will come when God restores all things. Like Jesus is saying, those who take this lower position, your reward is everything that God has in store for his people. Your reward is the great reward of God that is waiting for you, that is already prepared. But Jesus does more than that when he's talking about this kind of thing with us. In fact, Jesus calls us to himself out of gentleness. I want to propose to you this morning that gentleness is Jesus' lemonade stand. You ever go out and work all day in the yard and you get that kind of lightheaded, I am parched kind of feeling? Your tongue is dry, your body is aching, and you just need relief. You need refreshment and renewal. I have been out working like that before, and without even asking, my wife just shows up with a big, tall glass for me. Right? Why am I getting teared up about that? Oh, and she brings it to me and just smiles and walks away. And in 5 seconds, it's gone. And you can feel it moving from your mouth down to your throat and the coolness going down into your, you know what that feeling is? And how just satisfying it is? Jesus is your lemonade stand. Listen to what he says in Matthew chapter 11. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and what? I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." He turns and he says, when you are weary, burdened, when you're just at the end and you need refreshment and renewal, I'm your guy, he says. This is what you will get from me. I am your drink of lemonade. I will renew. He turns to this language of take my yoke upon you. You know, the yoke is this wooden thing that puts two oxen together, that makes them pull together. It is a phrase that was used to describe the burden of accepting the law of God. And the rabbis would have a yoke of their teaching that they would hand off, and to accept their yoke is to accept the teaching and the requirements that they had. And Jesus is turning and he's saying, accept my teaching, accept the cup that I'm giving you. Like, my lemonade is really good. Trust it. And then he doubles down on that and he says, learn from me. And what he's pointing to is, yes, learn from my teaching, learn from my instruction of how this ought to go, but learn from me. You see, Jesus is the fulfillment of the law of God. He is the person I just lost my word. He is the embodiment, change the word, of the law of God. Like, he is that. If you want to see how to fulfill the law, go see Jesus. Learn from me, he says. The Spirit, or the fruit of the Spirit, is the nature and the character of Christ himself. He is the embodiment of what gentleness ought to look like. And that's what he says. He says, I am gentle and humble in heart. See, this is the Jesus way. If you want to know what it looks like to be a man of God, it is the Jesus way. It is gentle and humble in heart. And we need to ask the question of, what is that? And I think it's a far greater picture than what our society has told us. Gentle and humble in heart. Again, it's the assuming the lower position for the good of the other person. It is not submissiveness. It is strength and courage. It is sacrifice that is unusual. But it is the opposite of irresponsible power. It is the opposite of lording it over. Like, you remember the story when James and John come to Jesus in Matthew chapter 20, and they want positions of authority and power. They want the right and the left hand of Jesus when he comes into his power. And he's like, yeah, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Can you really do this? And it's that big old conversation. And then he turns and he says, like, leadership in my kingdom isn't what you think. It looks different. He says, you know how the Gentiles function? They take their authority and they lord it over and they oppress people. Not so with you. But if you want to be great, be a servant. If you want to be first, be a slave. Like, use your power and authority for the good of someone else, not for the elevation of yourself. It is the way of our God. It is the very nature of Christ himself. In our teaching meeting, Brady shared this text, and I want to share it with you. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 10 and 11. Look at the description of our God. He is the sovereign Lord, the one who is over and in control of all things, the one who comes with power, the one who rules with a mighty arm. He is God. And with him he brings his reward and his recompense. But what does he do with that power? He comes as a shepherd. That strong, fear-inducing power he chooses to move in with as a shepherd. He gathers his lambs in his arms, holds them close to his heart, and he gently leads those that have young. This is Jesus, the physical embodiment of the powerful, gentle God. So he says, when you come to me, you will have rest in your souls. When you come to me, I will put you first, he says. I will choose to be the one who wraps the towel around my waist and washes your feet. I will be the one who gives you water to drink. I will be the one who dies for your good. You will have rest for your soul when you come to me. See, Jesus promises renewal and rest rather than judgment. And with that renewal, the beautiful thing is that immediately begins like when we receive that lemonade stand thing from Jesus and it enters us, it begins to reorder and reshape who we are. Like the gentleness of God becomes ours. It's what the Spirit of God is. Like God enters and he reshapes who we are with what he is. And we begin to prioritize people over position. Do you hear that? We begin to move into not only peace with God, but we become a people who offer peace with others. Because we hand off what we've received. We become gentle because we've encountered our gentle God. You see, you go look at these fruit of the Spirit, and they all have a dual action. We receive something from God, and it has external relational implications. You can't have gentleness, carry that fruit, without it involving other people. And so, I believe Jesus calls us to submit to his way so that he can be reflected in our world. Gentleness of Christ. Proverbs 15:1 says this: a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Journey, when the world encounters us as followers of Jesus, do they see and encounter the face of Christ on you? Is their experience with you the gentleness of our Good Shepherd. The way to that is openness to his Spirit. It's really interesting. This text that we're in is Galatians chapter 5. It's at the end of that chapter. And at the very start of Galatians chapter 6, it says this. It says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, rebellion to God, that's sin. You who live by the Spirit should restore that person, what's our word? Gently. Meaning, looking for their good, serving them, trying to help them move into rest and renewal, rather than focusing on you and how you feel about this situation and what it's going to do with the outcomes for you. You should restore him gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. You who live by the Spirit. This is where this happens. Gentleness is the fruit of the Spirit. It is submission to his way in our lives. When someone is caught in rebellion against God, we move in with the gentleness of Christ. We move in with one goal: restoration back into life. We move in with the posture of Christ, willing to sacrifice for their good. We take the position of the servant with a towel wrapped around her waist. This is when someone is in rebellion. That's the way. Christ's model is for us. Because you see, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is his way. And journey, the results of the gentleness of Christ, it disarms anger. It diffuses tense situations. It opens doors for meaningful, transforming conversations. It creates the bond of peace. Gentleness moves people beyond agendas and into compassion. Gentleness values other people's feelings, and gentleness addresses other people's needs. So let's close with this picture. When is a good time to offer gentleness in our world? I've said this the last 3 times that I've preached, and I'm going to say it again. I hope what's on the screen wrecks you this week, because it's kind of done a number to me. The gentleness of Christ is offered. A time for gentleness is when someone disappoints you. A time for gentleness is when someone disagrees with you. By the way, I wonder how many people are going to disagree with you on November 5th. Like, I'm serious here. Our world ought to see the gentleness of Christ as we function with each other on November 5th. When someone betrays you, when someone is in rebellion against God. Let me just ask you, can you remember the last time someone betrayed you? Like really betrayed you? Like they intentionally hurt you? I want to tell you, in that moment, if invited, the Spirit of Christ will empower you to function in that moment with gentleness. Gentleness that looks like Christ. As the band comes up, I want to leave you with that picture. Because you see, this is who Jesus is. At the end of his life and ministry, one of his best friends betrayed him multiple times. You remember? Peter, saying that he doesn't even know him. He disowns Jesus 3 times the night that Jesus was arrested and then later crucified. And after Jesus rose from the dead, what did our great God do? He had every right to come to Peter and blow him up. It's the God of the universe that has been denied and betrayed. But what does he do? He has breakfast on a beach with the guy. And what is in his language? He turns to Peter and he says, if you want to go read it, it's John chapter 21. He turns to Peter and he says, Peter, doesn't call him Peter, he calls him Simon. He says, do you love me? It's this gentle question from a shepherd with a loving heart that longs to restore. And he asks again, do you love me? And then he asks the 3rd time, do you love me? And the beautiful thing is, not only is Jesus functioning from the heart of a shepherd with him, longing to restore him, but in that moment, he's calling Peter to be a shepherd himself. He's calling Peter into gentleness because he turns and he says, well, if you love me, then feed my sheep. Then take care of my lambs. If you love me, then do for them what I'm doing for you right now. In the midst of betrayal, gentleness wins. That is what a strong man of God looks like. Power that is sacrificed for someone else's good. And by the way, women, that's what strong women of God look like too.